Welcome to Satsang.
Can you please talk about the topic resting in stillness?
Okay. So this is a question that's related to enlightenment in a lot of ways, because when awareness is aware of itself, that is stillness, that is silence. The mind itself is not really still. It's not really peaceful. It's noisy. But what we truly are, who we truly are, is absolutely still and absolutely silent. And so you could say peaceful. So the seeker is seeking that is still and silent. And that's difficult because we're actually programmed to look for that moves and that makes noise. And so we miss the background that the noise and the movement appear in, and it is the background, that is purely aware, purely conscious, that is our own true nature. So in looking for stillness, in looking for silence, we're really looking for enlightenment. The revolution against the mind begins. The revolution to go beyond living as an ego, going beyond living as a mind and a body. The revolution to take us to enlightenment begins. But only you can make that revolution happen, because it's in your court. You're responsible for you. You're responsible for where you put your awareness. You're responsible for how you think. And as long as your awareness is on the mind and through the senses, the world, and not on itself, you're not awake. You may think you're awake because you can see things and think about things and hear things and contemplate things, but awakening is when that's aware of the mind becomes aware of itself, becomes conscious of itself, and stays aware of itself and conscious of itself. And that is the quest. That is the true revolution. Are there any questions, any statements, or any challenges to this teaching today?
The first question is as follows. Life keeps giving me chances to surrender, relax, and rest in stillness through health challenges. How can I know this resting is at a truly deep level, where the ego can't use it to its advantage?
Health challenges, wonderful stuff. When existence slows you down because of health issues, it's an opportunity to go deep inside yourself, to find that doesn't move, to find that is still. It's an opportunity to see through the mind, because you're not being distracted by the world. I was very fortunate enough in 1988 to contract hepatitis, and it nearly destroyed my liver. And so I was in bed for 6 months, and before that I was a very active person. And so to be in bed for 6 months was a real trial for me. I was sleeping in the beginning about 18 hours a day because my liver was really mucked up. But what it did is it allowed me to have a look at myself. And so I dragged a mattress into the lounge room and sat under that and slept under that and basically lived under that situation for 6 months, where I just got to see how my mind worked and I got to find what was truly silent and what was really, really peaceful. And it wasn't my mind. People try to find peace in their mind. That's an impossibility, really, because it's not programmed for that. It's programmed to be noisy. You want true peace. You want true silence. You want true stillness. Find that you are. Find beingness. Put awareness on itself. And keep putting awareness on itself until it stays there. And that's going to be up to you. Nobody can do that for you. And so I have got two things that work really well. One is openness, the practice of, and the other is self-inquiry, the practice of. Self-inquiry can take awareness to itself, who you really are, and openness helps you see all the obstacles that are in the way of achieving that. The two practices together can be done in the marketplace, because nobody needs to know that you're practicing openness, and nobody needs to know that you're practicing self-inquiry. And you can do it all day long, and nobody knows. And you're practicing spiritual practices for freedom. It's up to you. There's nothing wrong with formal meditations, sitting silently, watching the breath. They're great too. But if you're in the marketplace, you've got a family maybe, you've got a job that you might be having to work at, you can practice openness, you can practice self-inquiry while you're doing these things. And that works. In openness, we get to see all the things that are in the way of our freedom. We get to see everything that contracts us. And so in a way, just watching the mind is a revolution in the mind itself, because we get to see what's in the way and we get to allay what's in the way. The revolution, up to you.
The following question has been asked by a viewer. How do I see the stillness and silence in between each movement or sensory activation?
Okay. And so when we're reading a newspaper, we read the print. We don't really see the paper because we're reading the print. And so we miss what's there. We miss the background. We miss in the case of beingness, we miss beingness because we're seeing what's moving in it. We're looking at experience. What's the experience appearing in? And this can be found by asking the question, who am I, or who's aware? And this question doesn't need to be answered by the mind. It is just a positioning to turn awareness that is aware of the mind back onto itself. So who's aware? Who's aware of every thought? Or what's aware of every thought? You really want to find the stillness and silence. Turn awareness back to itself. And then there is vast stillness, vast silence. Because what we are doesn't make noise, doesn't move. Experiences appear in it. But people get caught up in looking for experiences. And they appear in beingness, but they're kind of like in the way. They're distractions. What's the experiences appearing in? What's the background of vast emptiness and nothing? What's this that is purely aware? That's a better quest.
The next question has been asked by a viewer. If I randomly ask, "What am I?" during the day for a minute and nothing happens, is that self-inquiry?
Yes, ask it for another minute. There's no reason why you can't ask the question to every thought that arises. A thought arises, you ask the question, who's aware of this thought? And you follow it back. What's the source of the I? You follow it back. What's this that is simply aware? What's this that is simply conscious? I mean, you're already here. There is nowhere to go. You're at your final destination. It's just that you're not aware of it, that's all. Awareness is not aware of the pure consciousness that it is. And so in asking the question, what's aware, you're attempting to turn awareness back to itself. You're attempting to wake up. Don't stop attempting. Keep attempting.
When I try to rest in stillness through meditation, I find it gets emotionally uncomfortable. Will the stillness I seek come eventually?
The stillness you're finding is probably no mind, which is still mind. The mind's not operating as it's not thinking, but there's awareness still on the mind. So it is eventually going to move again. And in your case, emotionality moves. So that's why you can't really find stillness in the mind, because it's not its nature to stay still. You really want to find stillness and silence. You actually have to turn awareness back to itself and find yourself as beingness. And then the mind goes still anyway, because it rests in beingness, it rests in the stillness, it rests in the silence.
It is popular in spiritual circles to attend silent meditation retreats to find inner stillness. Is this valuable, and how can one make best use of the insights that may come from retreats?
It is valuable in that it gives you an understanding that there's more there than just what you think. And the insights that come are invitations basically to do the work to remove any obstacle that is in the way. But ultimately, you really want to find stillness and silence. You really want to find freedom and peace. You have to find awareness as yourself. And so attending silent meditation retreats are good in themselves, but they're not as good as sitting with someone who's awake. Because in the presence of someone who's awake, you can find yourself as beingness. Because someone who's awake has a Buddha field. And in that Buddha field, there's a doorway to you. And so all efforts should be made for the seeker to wake up. And that includes finding someone who's awake to sit with. For myself, I started looking when I was 28 and went and lived in India and America with my awake teachers because there was a Buddha field. And I recognized how valuable that Buddha field was. Nothing can beat a Buddha field. You can sit for hours and hours and hours and do meditations and not find the same thing as you can find in a few minutes in a Buddha field. And so when people ask me what's the best thing you can do to wake up, my advice is very simple. Find someone who's awake and sit with them.
The following question is from a viewer. Mind seems like internal thoughts and feelings, an external world. So if turning away from mind to find stillness, is that turning away from everything?
The question would be, who's doing the turning? In the question itself, it's indicative that the ego somehow thinks that it is the one that wakes up. And that's a fallacy. The ego never wakes up. That's aware of the ego, that's aware of the mind, finds itself, discovers itself, and that is awakening. Particularly if it stays on itself, that is enlightenment. Everything is outward. Awareness outward is on the mind, the thoughts are outward, what's been seen is outward. Inward is when awareness becomes aware of itself. That's aware of the mind turns inward and becomes aware of itself. And that is very different. It's not the ego that does that. The ego actually becomes redundant because the ego itself is a series of projections, dream, which aren't real. You take away imagination and your ego doesn't actually exist. But beingness does. That that's aware is always here. And so whether the mind is present or not present, there's something aware all the time. The quest is to find that that is aware all the time. Everything is outside except it.
You were speaking earlier of looking for awake teachers to sit with. How can a seeker identify a true Buddha field and not be led astray by false teachers?
Good question. So anybody who's studied any form of spirituality can probably talk on the subject, and people who have been involved for a long time can talk at length and quite elegantly on enlightenment, on how to get there, and everything, and still not be awake. Someone who's awake has a Buddha field. They have an energy field around them that expands and quietens the mind. That is evidence of enlightenment. There is no other evidence. When you wake up, it will be you doing the talking. It'll be your personality that's being used, your body that's being used. Enlightenment does not have a look. It has a presence. And in that presence, people can wake up, they can gain clarity, they can start to see all the things that are in the way, and their mind starts expanding, and they start finding peace. And so that Buddha field that is created when someone wakes up, when awareness stays aware of itself, is the same for all enlightened people, and it has a frequency. It's an energy field, and it has a frequency. And those who become known to that energy field can tune into it in any being on the planet who's awake. If you think of anybody who's awake and you know the frequency of the Buddha field, you tune in and your mind will start to become silent. Your mind will start to become still. It'll start to expand. That's up to you. Find someone to sit with who's awake, tune in, find that energy field, and you recognize it as your mind starts to quieten and it starts to expand. The other thing that can happen in that energy field is your heart can start to open. You can start to experience love. This is the beauty of satsang, of being in the presence of somebody who's awake. It is a doorway to your own true nature.
I know some people who are very sensitive to the energy field of enlightenment, and others who are not. What makes someone sensitive or not sensitive to this presence?
Yeah. When I first sat with Osho Rajneesh at the ranch in 1984, I didn't feel a great deal of his presence, and it was because my mind was too businesslike. It was too closed. And the next year when I went back for 4 months, it blew my socks off because something had opened in me and I was able to perceive it. But in the first place, I didn't perceive that much because I was too closed. But once I did perceive it, I fell in love with that energy field, and I did everything to facilitate experiencing and feeling it. I removed all obstacles that were in the way so I could just feel what was there. And in so doing so, what I was doing was falling in love with beingness, because my mind was now serving beingness instead of serving itself. And those who are awake serve beingness. They do not serve themselves. This is very beautiful.
The following question is from a viewer. So, you say to spend time with energetically open people like enlightened people. What is your opinion on spending time with people who are not open and, for example, block feelings?
Look, that's the case for most human beings, because so many human beings on this planet are closed and not open. I mean, we all went to school and learnt to close pretty aggressively towards the different peer group pressures that we came in contact with. You find someone who's really, really open, and you found someone who's done a lot of work on opening themselves, because it's actually not natural for us really to be open. It's more natural for us to be closed, particularly as we all went to school. One of the things that I did notice though about every person I've met who's awake is they are wide open. And that would have been the case before enlightenment as well, because openness facilitates enlightenment. Openness facilitates experiencing love, the heart, and openness facilitates healing the wounds of the heart. In my opinion, openness counts for everything.
The next question. Did your interest for the world drop as you started to value silence and stillness more?
Yeah, sure did. I found that I was more interested in being quiet. I found I was more interested in being alone. I found my own company very beautiful. After initial awakening, I sat still for 6 months for about 18 hours a day, just blissing out in beingness. And so as you go closer and closer to beingness, you become quieter and quieter inside, because the mind itself falls in love with beingness. It falls in love with the silence and stillness, and it just wants to rest in it. And so the love affair between the mind and beingness, or the beloved, has begun. And in that love affair, the mind surrenders unconditionally to truth. Everything is let go of, and enlightenment occurs.
What would you recommend to someone that has no prior experience to meditation or reference points when they are searching for silence and stillness?
Look, if you want to become a plumber, you do an apprenticeship. If you want to become an electrician, you do an apprenticeship. If you want to become a mechanic, you do an apprenticeship. If you want to know about truth, if you want to know about meditation, you need to do an apprenticeship. Find someone who knows and learn from them. Don't arrogantly think you can do it by yourself. That would be like hiring a plumber to do an electrician's job they haven't been trained for. As Westerners, we're not trained for meditation. We're trained for thinking. We're trained for problem solving. We're trained to procrastinate and worry. Meditation is quite foreign. Find someone who really knows what they're doing and learn from them. Because when we're prepared to be beginners, we have a chance of learning.
The following question is from Jamie, who's on Facebook. She writes, "Amazing. Thank you, Vishrant. You have the presence of a happy cloud. Can you please elaborate on openness? How to cultivate this, aside from sitting with an open being?"
Yeah. Yes, Jamie. Openness means that there's no contractions. See, every time someone triggers us, we're likely to contract, we're likely to close to defend ourselves from feeling something. True openness, you don't contract anymore because you've removed those defense systems. You remove the belief systems that have expectations upon them that cause contraction. You've actually done the work on yourself. And so every time that you find yourself in contraction or in resistance, there's an opportunity to open up. And in that opportunity, not only to open up, but to see how and why you contracted in the first place and remove those reasons. And so if we truly want to be open in the material world, we have to remove all the things that contract us. That doesn't mean avoiding the world at all. It means removing the belief systems that have expectations on them inside ourselves. And so if someone lies to you, someone betrays you, someone does something bad to you, no contraction. Openness remains. And from that openness, you can deal with the world. You could say another way to do it is to accept life as it is, the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. Because in acceptance of life, we remain open. It's only in the non-acceptance of life or the resistance to life that we close. Now, I'm not going to suggest for a second that this is easy, because it's not. But if you're really interested in having a happy life, openness is best. Remove everything that creates closure in you. Remove all the obstacles and become free. Up to you.
The following question is from a viewer. Can you talk about energetic protection versus openness?
Energetic protection is closure. And it's a new age concept that makes us think we need to protect ourselves energetically. And it gets justified by, well, people fill us up with density and it hurts us. Yeah, that may very well be true. But if you're into higher consciousness, any defense system that you have is actually in the way. Openness actually counts for everything, and it really does. If you're going to put energetic defenses in place or energetic protections in place, you are handicapping yourself in the game of higher consciousness, because those very defense systems will keep you locked in lower consciousness. People who are awake have no defense systems. They're absolutely vulnerable.
There's a follow-up question from Jamie, who writes, so is that where self-inquiry comes in?
Self-inquiry is a methodology for enlightenment. There's two varieties that I know. One is the Zen methodology, which I used extensively in the 80s because I loved it. And that was, you ask the question, who am I? And then you actually answer it with the mind. After you've answered it with the mind, you discount the answer. Not this, neti neti. And then you ask the question again, who am I? And you answer it and you discount it. That methodology is very effective, but it has to be done for long, long periods of time. In 1987, I was walking along the foreshore in Adelaide, Perth, and I had been asking the question for 4 hours. I'd started at 6, and it was around about 10 o'clock in the morning. And I found myself as the universe. I asked the question, who am I? And there was this echoing into nothingness. And what had actually happened was awareness was turning back on itself. I didn't know that at the time, but that's what was happening. And I found myself as the universe. Every particle, every bit, the whole universe. Absolutely silent, absolutely still, absolutely indescribable. And so that method of self-inquiry works. The second lot of self-inquiry that I discovered later in the 90s, which is the Advaita Vedanta methodology of self-inquiry, where you actually ask the question, who's aware, or what's aware, or who am I, and you don't answer it. There's an attempt to turn that is aware of the mind onto itself simply by asking the question. And that needs to be repeated over and over again as well. Ramana Maharshi was asked, when do you stop self-inquiring? And his answer was very simple: when there is no one left to inquire. And I agree. And so those two methods of self-inquiry work, but only if they're practiced, and only if they're practiced at length. And that's going to be up to you as to whether you do that or not.
The next question is from a viewer. You ask that we should accept being filled with density. Is that something we can seek to get used to, or just accept when it comes along?
Just accept. As far as getting used to something, really and truly, if we're interested in higher consciousness, we can't have defenses. Every defense that we have is in the way of higher consciousness. It keeps us locked in lower consciousness. So there's certain things that you probably don't want to do when you become very open and vulnerable. You probably don't want to go out to nightclubs or hotels or places where people are purging a great deal because they're taking drugs. You probably don't want to be involved in those environments. And you probably like to spend time by yourself. You probably like to have your own sanctuary somewhere. But that's just spirituality. In traditional spirituality, a lot of people become monks and nuns and sadhus and lock themselves away in monasteries and caves and whatever else. But for me, I teach mostly lay people who are interested in higher consciousness and enlightenment. And so I teach a way that works in the marketplace. And you still need sanctuary, but you can't close. If you close, you've actually been defeated by your own mind. And so you do need to have your own sanctuary. You do need to have a way of life in the marketplace that will support spirituality, will support higher consciousness. Openness is required. Surrender is required. Acceptance is required. That's something you can practice without anyone knowing. It's brilliant. It's up to you.
The next question is from a viewer. Why is it a bad idea to spend time in places where there is purging, say in hotels, nightclubs, etc.?
It depends on how much clarity you want to lose. You see, when we fill up with density from other people who are purging, we lose our clarity. And clarity is a requirement for higher consciousness. Higher consciousness basically is when we see through our minds and we don't get caught in our minds anymore. And so instead of being reactive, we become responsive. But to be responsive, we need to be aware, and to be aware, we need clarity. When we're constantly filling up with densities, it's hard to have clarity. And so it's important for spiritual practitioners in the marketplace to find clarity and to do whatever it takes to get clarity, however they want to clear their energy or whatever. Because without clarity we can't see, without clarity we can't we start reacting to life instead of responding to life.
What do you recommend as a way of life that supports openness and higher consciousness in the marketplace?
You know, I started serving the heart a long, long time ago. And it was a choice. It was a conscious choice because I saw that basically, from the perspective of heart, I was pretty bankrupt. I'd been a businessman for a lot of years, and I'd managed to close myself off enough to not experience a great deal of heart. And I decided that heart was more important than business. Heart was more important than success in the world. And so I've made heart a goal. And in making heart a goal, I recognize that, well, when I'm closed, I don't feel heart. When I'm when I'm reacting to the world, I don't feel heart. I feel heart when I'm open. And that's when I decided that openness counted for everything because it supported heart. But that takes practice, because we close a great deal as human beings because of our initial programming. And so to support heart, there's a great undoing that's required. The undoing of all defense systems that are in the way. And it's a project that's going to take quite a while because it's difficult, but it's up to you. It's the best thing in the world. There is nothing better than love. Love is the true jewel of consciousness. And people, assume that they can love. But I tell you, if you're closed, you're not loving. You forbid yourself. You can't perceive it because you're closed. You've got defenses in the way. You want to perceive love, open up. Open right up. Stay open.
Do you think that I need to heal the wounds of my heart before I can find peace? Or is this another trick of the mind?
Yeah, it's a trick of the mind. That's just your mind giving yourself something to do other than waking up. I mean, you go for enlightenment at the same time as healing the wounds of your heart. You don't just heal the wounds of your heart and think that you put off going for enlightenment later. That doesn't work. No, you do both at the same time. And you heal the wounds of your heart simply by allowing yourself to feel them, which once again is openness, removing the defense systems that stop you from feeling.
This following question is from a viewer. Why does feeling equal healing?
Well, pain bodies are energy bodies trapped in the body somewhere that we haven't been willing to feel, that we've repressed. And unfortunately, the deal goes something like this. If you release that pain body, it is going to hurt. It's going to be painful. And unless you're willing to feel that, you won't release it. You'll keep it prisoner inside of you. And so feeling equals healing because the only way we can heal is to let the pain body out. And there will be pain if we let it out. We will feel pain. And so we have to be willing to feel. And that's up to you. It would be really nice if it could leave without us feeling it, but that's not how it works. If we've repressed a whole pile of emotionality, we are going to go through the dark night of the soul when it starts releasing. It's going to be painful. It's going to hurt. We're going to feel helplessness. We're going to feel hopelessness and everything else that we've packed into that pain body. So feeling equals healing.
You have said that you found silence and stillness before enlightenment. What did you drop to make that your priority?
It's not so much what I dropped, it's more like what I learnt. I learnt to accept life as it is rather than resisting life. You see, when we accept life, the drama's over. It's the end of drama. It's only when we're in non-acceptance or resistance to life that we have drama. And so you're the one that creates that. You're the one that resists, or you're the one that accepts. Now, acceptance goes against our nature. It's against survival. We are programmed to resist. We're programmed to struggle and survive. And so someone who's mastered their mind has basically mastered surrender, mastered acceptance. Stuff happens, and instead of reacting, they're responding. But quite often people think, well, if you accept everything, you'll do nothing. That's simply not true. You just do it from a place of openness instead of a place of closure, that's all. It's up to you. You're going to create your reality. Are you going to create a reality that is open and non-resistant? Or are you going to continue with a reality that creates suffering in you because resistance is suffering? Up to you.
How do I know when I am truly resting in stillness? And can my mind trick me into thinking I am in stillness when I am just in dream?
Yes, the mind can do that. The mind can produce through its ability to imagine stillness, silence, even love. It can produce all of these things because it has an ability to imagine. The way that you tell whether it's real or not is really simple. What the mind produces becomes stale. The real deal is never stale. It's always fresh.
I find my monkey mind wants to constantly entertain itself by the constant doing. What can I do to find contentment in sitting still?
Contentment and the monkey mind don't go hand in hand. Contentment is one of the definitions I have for happiness, profound contentment for no reason. But the only way that I know that to occur is for you to wake up and know yourself as truth. And then the mind has profound contentment for no reason. The monkey mind is the monkey mind because it's not disciplined. It's never been trained to be quiet. Meditation facilitates that training. Watching the breath facilitates that training. Learning acceptance and surrender facilitates the mind settling down and calming down. As long as you're in resistance to life, the mind is not going to settle down. How has your mind been trained? Has it actually been trained to be quiet, or has it been trained to be a little monkey running around all over the place? Because if it's been trained to be a little monkey running all over around the place, it needs to be retrained. It's in the way. And that's going to be up to you. Nobody can train it for you but you.
When I get emotionally disturbed, what's the best way to come back to resting in stillness?
Use the outward breath to let go. And so in using the outward breath, we're using acceptance, but we're using it with something that is real. In breathing out fully, we let go. And so we have awareness on what is real, the breath, and we are practicing let go. This can bring you back to a quiet mind. The breath is a wonderful tool for teaching you how to let go. But it can only teach you that if you practice it. And so when you're disturbed, allow yourself to breathe out deeply and let everything go. And continue doing that until there's nothing left.
Following comment is from a viewer. While you are in silence and stillness, you're also experiencing the sound and movement of the world. It seems like you are doing both.
Depends what you're living as. If you're living as beingness, you are silence and stillness. If you're living as a mind, well, that's a whole nother story. The mind doesn't really be silent and still for very long. And so the quest for the seeker is to find themselves as that is real. The mind is not real. Beingness is real. Who we are is real. Pure awareness or pure consciousness that we are is actually real. The mind is not real. And for it to exist, it has to really move. And so in abandoning the mind for what is real, we find what is real. Self-inquiry enables that abandonment in a way, because it turns awareness back to itself, which is silent and still. This is very beautiful, but it can only be done with practice. It doesn't happen that easily. People think, oh, self-inquiry is easy. Not really. It takes practice, the same as meditation takes practice, the same as openness takes practice, the same as acceptance of life as it is takes practice, because we're practiced at the opposite, and the opposite is our default patterning. And so to change that, we have to practice something different quite a bit.
How do I know if I'm doing self-inquiry correctly?
The best thing you can do is find someone who's awake to teach you. You see, people think they can do this game of higher consciousness by themselves. That's a thought, not a reality. I had guides my whole life, people who were further ahead showing me the way to go. And that worked. Because when you get it wrong, when you're going in the wrong direction, how do you know you're going in the wrong direction unless someone tells you? So every time I stepped off the path or stepped into the wrong direction, I had a mentor saying, hey, you've stepped off the path, come back here. And that's the beauty of finding someone who's awake to teach you, because they know the way, otherwise they wouldn't be home. Trying to learn the way home from people who aren't even home themselves is a complete waste of time. They're already lost. How would they know the way?
It seems like you repeat your teachings a lot. Do you ever get bored of doing this repetition?
When you live in the moment, there's no such thing as repetition. It's only when you're living in your head that there's repetition, or the seemingness of repetition. There's no such thing as repetition. No moment can ever be repeated. Not possible. Everything is new, everything is fresh, every moment. There is no boredom here.
You say that in stillness, nothing moves. What does that mean?
Well, I think the word stillness pretty much sums it up, don't you?
True that. Is it possible to put out very strong boundaries, but still rest in that silence?
Well, putting out strong boundaries has to do with being in the material world. Resting in silence has something to do with the inner world. And you can bring the inner world to the outer world by keeping awareness on awareness. But as soon as your awareness goes back to the mind, you find that there's a lot of movement, because that's the way the world is. That's the way the mind is. If you really want to find that stillness continuously, wake up. Do whatever it takes to wake up, and then stay awake. I've noticed of late there's teachers out there who have had satori's. They've had glimpses of truth, and now they claim to be awake. And this is simply not true. Awake is every moment. Awareness on awareness is every moment, night and day, 24 hours a day. It's not a glimpse. You have the potential to live as beingness because you are beingness. But awareness needs to stay on itself for that to be true. Self-inquiry gives that opportunity. So does meditation. These ways work, but they only work if they're practiced. You cannot think your way to enlightenment. That is not possible. Thinking itself is a dream. There's something aware of the thinking. What's that that's aware of the thinking? Now that's of interest.
The next question is from a viewer. There was a satsang where you cut it short. I'm not sure if you didn't like the questions. Is there some questions you don't like to accept?
Yeah, I am a satsang teacher. I teach people how to get free. I don't have a great deal of interest in psychology. I used to, but I don't anymore. I'm interested in helping people go beyond the mind, not how to work out their daily lively problems. There's other people that can do that. My job really here is to help people go beyond the mind and find themselves as truth. And so when people ask mundane psychological questions, I'd rather refer them to a psychologist or a psychotherapist. I find them unhelpful because basically those type of questions just take people back into their minds. They don't take them beyond their minds. My interest is in teaching that takes people beyond the mind.
In the undoing of the mind, does resting in stillness and silence mean there is no more work to be done?
If you're awake, there's no more work to be done. Awakening is the end of it all. As a matter of fact, if you want to change anything about your mind, you're better off doing it before you wake up, because after you wake up, you won't be interested, because everything is perfect as it is. Enlightenment is the ultimate freedom. No fear, no problems. Everything's perfect as it is.
Besides the identified mind, what are the other obstacles to resting in silent awareness?
Well, there's only one obstacle, really. It's where your awareness is at. Is your awareness on itself, or is it on something else? Where's your awareness at? So we talk about obstacles. It's like, if your awareness is not on awareness, well, you're not going to find it, are you? You're not going to find that silence and stillness, not really. You might find it temporarily if the mind is in no mind, but the mind doesn't stay in no mind for too long. Mind is movement. What's aware of the mind is way more relevant, way more important. Who are you really? Sometimes people make the mistake of thinking no mind is beingness. No, no mind is just no thinking. That's not beingness. What's aware of no mind? What's that's aware of no mind? That's of interest.
When I meditate, I often have this sensation of expansion. Is this expansion a quality of stillness?
Well, you're experiencing the mind expanding. That's all. You want to call it a quality of stillness, it's just the mind expanding. An expanded mind really is probably in no mind, but it's expanded at the same time. Maybe there's a connection to the crown chakra, and through the crown chakra, everything. That's up to you. Keep meditating.
Following question is from a viewer. When I ask questions and listen to the answer, I feel different. Maybe it is you doing it. Do you know who you are doing it to?
There is a transmission occurring. Sometimes it's called the transmission of the lamp. It lights other people up. It expands their minds. It creates silence and stillness. And if you tune into it thoroughly enough, you can find yourself as truth. From my perspective, nothing is personal, so nothing is being done personally. The transmission is broadband. It's going out to everything. Tune in and find yourself as truth. Now, if you tune into anybody who's awake, you can find the same frequency and you can find the same expansion. It doesn't matter what they're saying, because words are actually irrelevant. You can't learn your way to higher consciousness or enlightenment, really. But if you tune into the energy field, you can start to find yourself as it. Now that's worthwhile, because that is a pathway to enlightenment. And throughout the centuries, enlightened people have allowed themselves to be with others who are interested in truth, interested in waking up. And in this allowing, others have woken up. The thing that forbids people waking up is they have an interest in something else that is greater. The people who wake up have an interest in truth. They have an interest in waking up, and that's their main interest. The people who are awake have put truth first. They don't have another first. That's it. But people who aren't awake, who are seeking truth, and are probably putting something else first. It could be anything. It could be relationship. It could be money. It could be power, security of some kind, children. It could be anything. Those who are awake put truth first. And those who find heart put heart first. So you've got to ask yourself the question, what do you put first? What is your priority? Because anything that is put before truth is an obstacle. Because more than likely, you'll be attached to it. And attachment takes you to lower consciousness. In higher consciousness, there's the letting go of everything. You are free. You're not attached any longer. So what do you put first? People like to think of themselves as seekers. They're seeking truth and wisdom. But what do you put first? What do you really put first? Have a look at your priorities, and then you'll discover why you're at where you're at. What do you put first? Thank you for Satsang. Good to see you brave hearts here today.